this I'll daily ponder and sing anew his praise with all adoring wonder. His blessings I retrace. Oh, he saved my life. It seems as if eternal days are far too short to sing his praise. Oh, the love that sought me. Oh, the blood that bought me. Oh, the grace that brought me to the fold of God. Grace that brought me to the fold of God. Oh, the love that sought me. Oh, the blood that bought me. Oh, the grace that brought me to the fold of God. Grace that brought me to the fold of God. Oh, the love that sought me. Oh, the blood that bought me. Oh, the grace that brought me to the fold of God. Grace that brought me to the fold of God.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. My name's Danny. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm in recovery for drug and alcohol addiction. Hey, family. So first thing I want to say is it's an honor to come share. As I say, it's God's story. I just get to share it. And I don't share it like I've reached some spiritual mountaintop or I'm holier than thou, because I'm not. I'm a grateful believer. And I'm so happy y'all did that song. That's like my favorite song these days, because the God of the universe chased me down. He never gave up on me and pursued me with his reckless love. So for that, I'm extremely grateful. And at Celebrate Recovery, we always have people write their testimonies out. It does two things. It helps the person make sure that they're able, because we try to keep them 15 or 20 minutes. It helps the person make sure that they get everything they want to say. Because when you just go off the cuff, and you get through talking, you sit down and you go, oh, I should have said that, or I should have said that. So it helps you organize your thoughts, and also it helps you kind of land the plane, so I'm going to read my testimony, and then I'll share a little bit with you for a few minutes. So anyway, this is my story. I'm going to get my glasses on because I am getting older. These old bodies don't last forever, do they? So that said, I'm Danny. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm in recovery for drug and alcohol addiction. And I was abused from the time that I was an infant, physically, verbally, and mentally. My dad was a very explosive and disturbed man. My mother, on the other hand, was the most loving and caring person I've ever met or ever known. And growing up, we tried to pretend that it was a normal family, but it wasn't. We would lock ourselves in the bedroom out of fear of him, and at times for fear of our lives. I was never really close to him, and I avoided him most of the time. When I was 9, we attended a little undenominational church for a while, and it was there that I asked Jesus to be my Lord and Savior, and I was baptized the following week. And John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." And I remember how good that felt. It was real. And later that year, my mother started becoming mentally ill. My mother was diagnosed as bipolar, or they called it manic depression then, and my dad couldn't handle it. And instead of getting her help, he would jump on her and beat her up until I got old enough to step in and take the beatings. And I'm not going to go into the details of the physical abuse, but it was really, really bad. For years, my mother was in and out of the hospital, and my dad had to travel in his job, so I was left alone 4 to 5 days at a time, and the only family I had was a 12-year older half-sister who lived hundreds of miles away in Chattanooga. So through the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, I spent many weeks getting up, going to school by myself, coming home to an empty house, and learning how to fend for myself. The summer after 6th grade, my sister came and brought me to live with her in Chattanooga for the summer. And for whatever reason, she thought it'd be a good idea to turn me on to smoking weed. So I was 11. And I started smoking weed every day with her, and I started drinking soon after that. And that set the stage for 31 years of drugging and drinking and all the wreckage that goes with that. There were times that my mother came home from the hospital. In many ways, they were worse than being alone. She was so mentally ill that she thought we were all dead and living in hell. You know, Jesus helped me through those times. It really was a scary and lonely time in my life. And Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I'll help you, and I'll uphold you with my victorious right hand." You know, during those few years, my mother had like 16 electric shock treatments, and visiting her in the Philadelphia Psychiatric Center was worse than any horror movie. At one time, I thought they were seriously going to lock my dad up in there too, and I was about to freak out, wondering how I'd even get home. When I was 13, the doctors told me that my mother may not get any better than she was, and she was like a zombie. That was as good as telling a 13-year-old that his mother was dead. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, "He's the source of every mercy and the God who comforts us. He comforts us in all our troubles, so that when others are troubled, we'll be able to comfort them with the same comfort God has given us." Thank God they discovered lithium in 1975, and they started to treat my mother with it, and she got better. But my dad never did. When Mama was well enough to come home from the hospital, my dad got a transfer with TVA, and we moved to Gallatin in 1976. So I was now 14 and big into drugs and alcohol, and I often acted like the person I despised the most, my dad. My anger and resentment and the hatred escalated as my drug and alcohol use. I know now Jesus never left me. I just went the other way. I thought I knew it all. I didn't like myself or anyone else. And I remember my mama used to tell me, said, "Son, if you don't like yourself, there's a good chance no one else can stand to be around you." She was right. She was right. So, you know, the story goes on. I was arrested 3 times for public drunk before I turned 16, and quit the school in 11th grade, kind of got ran out. And I got a job. My dad helped me get a car, and guess what? 3 months later, wrapped it around a telephone pole, totaled it out. Could have killed my best friend whose face shattered out the windshield, and there was another couple in the back seat. Thank God they weren't hurt. I broke a few ribs myself, but I didn't go to jail. In the early 80s, I did drugs and sold drugs of all kinds, and had I been caught with the quantities I was selling, I'd still probably be in prison. You know, in spite of myself, God had some awesome blessings in store for me. And Jeremiah 29:11 says, "You know, I know the plans I have for you," says the Lord. "They're plans for good, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." And I met my wonderful wife, Lisa, when I was 18, and we dated for more than 3 years. And during that time, I had a Toyota Celica, and I managed to run it through a rock wall 50 miles an hour. I just got a DUI a week earlier, and I can see now how God was trying to get my attention. Had a DUI, fixing to go to court with 2, and had a fractured neck, but I was pretty hard-headed, and I still wasn't getting the message. Lisa and I got married March 18th, 1983, and I was really immature in a lot of ways. God blessed us with our first son, Corey Daniel, on December 3rd, 1988. And I wanted to be the father that I never really had. I was able to keep my job despite my addictions. I worked for R.R. Donnelly and Sons from 83 to 97, and during that time, September 12th of 93, we were blessed with our second son, Clint. I surely didn't then, and I don't now, deserve to have these awesome, they're young men now, who love the Lord, have never drank or drugged. That's grace. You know, and I tried then and I try now to tell them every day that I love them and I'm proud of them. You know, that's something that my dad never did, and I realize how important that is. After years of trying to be a husband, provider, and a father, I was constantly having to protect my mother and play mediator until my mother finally had enough, filed for divorce in '96. Of course, Dad threatened to kill us all and then himself, and it's just turned into a huge ordeal with my mother being committed to the Vanderbilt Psychiatric Ward. And when she got better, got out of the hospital, I got her into an assisted living facility. And once I had her in a safe place, I just lost it. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown, and heart was pounding out of my chest, and I made a big mistake. So I went to my mother's psychiatrist. Well, the psychiatrist diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder and treated me with Paxil and Klonopin. I'm going to tell you what, that was not the cure for me. Lord have mercy. I quit drinking and taking illegal drugs for a few months, and I was going to tell you, that prescription dope, that's what it is. It had me so completely out of my mind. I thought I felt better, but it was just that I felt different. You know, and I believe and I know I do have post-traumatic stress disorder, but the only thing that was really wrong with me was the absence of God in my life like he wanted to be. And that medication, you know, and I'm not blaming it on that, it had me pretty messed up, and I thought I didn't love my wife, and I started hanging out at the old bars, just drinking water, right? And I'd put myself, looking back, I put myself in the absolute wrong environment. And I made a horrible, horrible mistake, a rotten choice. I committed adultery. A divorce followed, and I stand here today, and I really cannot imagine the depth of hurt I caused my wife, Lisa, who'd been so faithful and the best mother to our boys. After we'd been divorced for about a month, I quit taking the prescription dope and went back to smoking weed and drinking beer again. I started to kind of get back to my old self, maybe just a little more humble. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Lisa could see that I was truly sorry and let me move back in after we'd only been divorced about 3 months. I thank God for her forgiving heart. Her love and forgiveness kept me from completely self-destructing. You know, she didn't marry me again right away. It took her about a year and a half again before she would marry me again, but that was the best thing I ever did twice. And yeah, so this year was 35 years. I think, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's a Nobel Peace Prize out there with her name on it. I'm pretty sure of that. But yeah, she's been awesome, and she's never brought that up, and we just try to act like it never happened. But anyway, you know, God still wasn't in my life like he wanted to be, and the bottom was right around the corner. And the bottom for me came when my mother died from heart failure in our own home at age 76, and I was only 41, so I really felt kind of cheated that I didn't have her longer. And, you know, I was so devastated, I acted the only way I knew how to act, and that was to get as high as I could get. I was eating 100 Blue Valiums a week or Xanax. If I could get 200, it wouldn't last 2 weeks. Smoking pot every 4 hours, drinking constant. And I was so miserable that I made everybody around me miserable too. Less than 6 months later, my awesome wife, Lisa, has a double rupture brain aneurysm. And I could have lost her too. But the Lord blessed me by saving her with no side effects. The doctor told me that he does 80 plus of those surgeries a year, and he's never seen anyone survive a double rupture. He told me that he was confident after the surgery that it ruptured and clotted twice, and it did. We know when, a week apart. And that was just the first of many miracles to come. As I look back now, I realize how I wasn't there for her emotionally because I was so self-centered. We didn't go to church at all. Our oldest son, Corey, had been involved with Long Haul, the youth program, for a couple of years, and during Lisa's stay at the hospital, we were overwhelmed with the church being the church. We saw the church in action. It was amazing to see my boys surrounded by people and parents and pastors I didn't know, loving on my boys, praying with them in the halls while I was slipping out in the parking lot at Vanderbilt and smoking dope and drinking beer like an idiot, walking through the waiting room like nobody could smell that. I look back and just think, wow, what was I thinking? And my wife, she told me, she said, when I come home from the hospital, they took a 3x3 by 3 inch square out of her skull and clipped off the aneurysm. She had 25 staples from the middle of her face around to her ear, and her eye was out to here. And she looked at me. She said, when I get home, I get better, I want to start going to Corey's church and I want to be baptized. And I said, you got it. You got it. So we did. We started going to church and joined the church. And Lisa and I and our youngest son, Clint, were baptized on Saturday night. And I think Corey wanted to wait till he got back from church camp. And but this time it didn't feel like it did when I was 9. I was recommitting my life to Jesus, and the old devil, he didn't like that at all. And I was under spiritual attack. I was beat up with just awful, crazy thoughts, just bombarding my head. So I called a friend who was a deacon at the time, is now a pastor, and I explained the feelings and thoughts I was having, and he led me through Ephesians, putting on the armor of God. And then I did the first step before I knew it was the first step, and I admitted to him, I said, Roger, there's something else going on. I've been chemically dependent to something most of my life. And being the smart man he is, he said, well, I don't know anything about that, but let me get you with somebody who does. And he gave me the number of a good friend of mine, Russell, who agreed to meet me at a Waffle House and explained about Celebrate Recovery. He invited me to the meeting on Wednesday night. So this was a Saturday, and, as he tells the story, when he saw me get out of the truck, he thought, whew, we're either going to fight or pray. I didn't even realize how mad I looked. I was one angry guy, And I remember asking him, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel good? And he looked at me and said, yeah, man, I do. He said, try it. If you ain't happy in 9 days, you can have your misery back. I went home and got a beer and smoked a joint and thought about what he said. And that's what I did. So I had to work midnights, and I went to work that night. And when I got off, it was Sunday morning. And I knew if I waited for my family to get up and go to church, I wouldn't make it. So I just cleaned up, and I went to the early service by myself, and I sat in the front row. And I'll never forget, Brother David was explaining that God loves us like we love our children. And if our children are disobedient, well, we may not just cast them right into a lake of fire, but there will be consequences in their life. Man, my jaw just dropped, and I thought, consequences? I got a whole plate full of consequences. I lost my mother. Less 6 months later, I almost lose my wife. And then I got denied insurance at a company I'd worked 113 straight days at because of a 24-hour period. So you can imagine what brain surgery looks like at Vanderbilt. I started getting some really sweet, Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, 103,000, 68,000, 27,000. And God knew that it would take all that to get me broken and on my face. And that's what it took, And when I heard Brother David say that, I was just stunned. And I went home, went out my shop, I got on my knees, and I told Jesus, I said, that's it. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I can't do it anymore. I've tried it on my own. Jesus, I'm yours. I don't know how I'm supposed to live sober, but I'm going to quit drugging and drinking. I trust you. If I'm supposed to be bankrupt, comfort my family. I can't even imagine how I'm supposed to live sober, but I trust you. I'm yours. Whew, Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And, I'd admitted the first step. I believed. And the third step was the life-changing step, was really the most important. We made a decision to turn our wills and our life over to care of God. It really was a life-changing step. So then that Wednesday, I went to the beginning of Celebrate Recovery. We were meeting in the band room at Beach High School, and there was about 6 or 7 folks in there. And from the moment I walked in, I felt love and acceptance. And I didn't hear an audible voice of God, but I really felt God say, this is where I want you to be, Danny. And after about 5 or 6 weeks, Long Haul took it on as official ministry of the church, and we moved over on campus, changing to Friday nights. And Later that summer, the leaders asked me to go with them to celebrate Recovery Summit at Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's church, where this all started 26 years ago. And there's really no way I could put that experience into words. I'll never forget John Baker saying on the first day of the summit, "Remember, you're not here by accident." And he was right. There were 4,000 people from all over the world, literally. I saw teams from Japan and the Philippines, and it was amazing. And so when I got back, I asked my brother Stan to be my sponsor. I joined a step study where we worked through the steps in a group of men for a year. And I discovered that the drugs and alcohol were only a result of the anger, the resentment, and the unforgiveness I had harbored for years. As a matter of fact, that resentment and unforgiveness I'd harbored for years was probably more destructive in my life than the drugs and alcohol. You know, I was able to completely forgive my dad for the harm that he'd done to me and my mother, and to forgive myself for the harm that I'd done to him when I got older, and others, especially my awesome wife. Working through those steps, I had to deal with the fact that in many ways I'd abused my wife. I never ever hit her, even in my most intoxicated state. But the fact remained that I abused her, verbally, mentally, and emotionally. And it was hard to get my arms around. I know how bad it hurt to see my mother beaten bloody, and I swore I could never do that to any woman, and I never have. But I also knew how bad it felt to be abused verbally, mentally, and emotionally. And through the step process, I realized that's exactly what I did to my awesome wife. That's why I needed then and need now a strong sponsor and accountability partners. Self-loathing sets in, and I needed my brother Stan to speak truth into my life. That's the support, that's the love, that's the truth I needed to not just give up and go back to what had been the normal in my life. Because of this process, I now understand and recognize most of the triggers that unaddressed would lead me back to that lifestyle. I still struggle with anger, pride, lust, selfishness. But these steps really help me stay tuned to God's plan. And like when I get mad, I can quote James 1:19, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, for a man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. After step study, I was asked to be a leader on the team, and I served as an encourager coach. And, I realized it took 43 years for God to shape me so that he could use me for his good purpose. I really am a totally different person. I'm still imperfect. Ask my wife. But I am forever changed. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed, and all things become new." I'd spent 31 years drinking and drugging, and I really have no longer that desire whatsoever. About a year and a half into my recovery, I was asked to celebrate recovery into the CCA prison. I thought, prison? What if they don't let me out? You know what? I still go to the prison, and it feels really, really good when they let me out. It's a really good feeling when that last door slides open. It's like, whoo, whoo, man, that's good. And so I did. I prayed about it and really felt led to. And I led Celebrate Recovery meetings in the CCA prison in Nashville for nearly 2 years, once a week. And it's been a huge part of my recovery, giving back. I've also led several step studies and had the privilege of sponsoring many men on the road to recovery, and it's really a blessing to give back that way. Long Haul asked me to start Celebrate Recovery at the Gallatin campus in '09, and I served as a ministry leader there for about 4 years, and it really was a blast. I moved from working at the CCA prison to the Sumner County Jail, and I met with the sheriff and the jail administrator, and we actually were bringing they have a program at Sumner County called the Homeward Bound. So if you're about 6 months from being released and you want to be in a Christ-centered program, they'll also teach you, GED and anger management and that kind of stuff. But I would do Celebrate Recovery, and we actually got the sheriff to bring about 15 guys, about 9 women would come to our Celebrate Recovery meetings, and they'd show up in their stripes, and we'd love on them, and it was really an awesome time. God had a really cool group up there for that season, and I know now that all the adversity and hardships I went through weren't for nothing. They had a purpose. Rick Warren says that God never wastes a hurt, and that's so true. I think he also said, out of your greatest pain will come your greatest ministry. And I believe that's true too. Brother Henry Bieber asked me to join him on a mission trip to Haiti in 2012. And wow, God showed up and showed out. He not only provided the funds for me to go, but provided enough for us to buy the CR literature that is translated into French. And it's printed in Switzerland and then has to ship over. So it's pretty expensive. And we stayed in Port-au-Prince with Pastor Moise Vival, which is an awesome man of God. And really was an honor to spend a lot of time with him and some of his church leaders. We shared our stories with him and met with the church members. They shared their stories of just incredible hurt, habits, and hang-ups. They started the first CR group there in Haiti that summer, and we also went to Long Haul, has an orphanage in Jeremy, and we met with Pastor Donny St. Germain, and he loved the material, and we left him some leaders' guides, and he wanted to incorporate it into the seminary that they were building. So in 2013, we went back, did some advanced leadership training with that group in Port-au-Prince, and they're still trying to do it. Small group, but they're doing it weekly, and it's really cool to see. And as I say, the road to recovery just gets better and better and better, and better and better and better. You don't ever arrive, and you don't ever stop. You keep moving forward, and when you do, it just keeps getting better and better. And so now, I've been to Haiti like 6 times, and or 7. The last 2 were we went and shared Celebrate Recovery. Chad went with us a couple years ago and did some awesome video work. Amazing the way it came out. And in May last year, at the end of the trip that Chad went with me on, Pastor Donny said, Danny, I have 1,500 pastors in the South that won't Celebrate Recovery training. And I said, 1,500? He said, yes, 1,500 pastors in an association of pastors. And I'm just like, you're kidding, right? He's like, no, they want it. And I said, well, we'll do it. And we had been praying to get 1,500 pastors a leader's guide, printed in Switzerland, translated in French, hardback book, and shipped over, was $15,000. Plus, we had to feed the pastors lunch because they're coming from all over the country to this one spot. So that was like $7,500. And say it all, it was like $22,000, $22,500. And I remember our pastor was he was talking about prayer, and he said, what are you praying for? Are your prayers me, I, what are you praying for? Or are you praying? And then he said something that really struck me. He said, are you praying for the impossible? And man, he opened the altar up, and I got on my face. I said, Lord God, $22,000 is absolutely impossible to me. But I know with you all things are possible. You know what? He supplied all the money. $22,000 was raised. It was unbelievable. And we got the book shipped, but then, the old devil, he never stopped. So customs held him for about 6 months. Telling him, oh, it's not for ministry. This is for school or business. And, well, give us $600, come back next weekend, and then $300. And then 6 months later and about $1,400 later, they finally got the books. And it's kind of unfortunate because those pastors were so fired up. And it was just, I think the devil just think, hey, I got to just stall it. I got to let the fire die down. But they got the books, and they've shared it with all their friends. There's another 600 pastors that want us to bring it to them. And in September, I'm going to lead another team where we'll train 300 pastors in Gonavives and another 300 in the Port-au-Prince area. And I'm just telling you, only God could do that. Only God could use a knucklehead like me to stand in front of 1,500 pastors and talk, much less teach them anything. I mean, most of them probably forgot more than will ever know. And it's just proof that God can use anybody, and He wants to use everybody if we're willing. you know. And all I can think of, is Ephesians 3:20. To him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we might ask or think, according to his power at work within us. And and for the last 4 years, I've been serving as Middle Tennessee State rep for Celebrate Recovery, and it's really been cool to meet with churches and help them start Celebrate Recovery. I've had the privilege of seeing many get started, and they're doing well now. And the Celebrate Recovery it's an evangelistic ministry, but it's also a discipleship ministry. When it teaches, it's not Celebrate Recovery's idea. Everything that we talk about, we point you back to the Bible. The Bible's the sole authority. It's not Rick Warren or John Baker. It's God's written word, and you can't go wrong with that. And so I always tell people, I will encourage everybody to continue their recovery and find the healing that's available through this ministry of Celebrate Recovery. And just remember, Celebrate Recovery is not the miracle. Jesus Christ is the miracle. The Celebrate Recovery is the tools that he uses to help us move past the dysfunction of the past and into an amazing relationship with him, where we can grow, where we can do the Great Commission, and that's to go and make disciples. It's a discipleship program. That's what those pastors were so excited about. They're not, alcohol, drugs, that's a little bit of a problem in Haiti, but that ain't their big problem. It's abandonment, abuse, neglect, those deep emotional wounds that if they're not dealt with in Christ-like manner, they're going to come out in really unhealthy ways. And so the pastors, they see how this could, for one, step one, that you admit you got a problem. 2, you come to believe in a power greater than yourself. That's a process. And then 3, you turn your life and will over. That's evangelist, But then when you do an inventory and you look at your life, how it lines up to the Bible, that's discipleship. That's what grows churches. That's what changes nations. And I just really encourage you that, if Neil and you guys are thinking about starting here, I'll be glad to help you any way I can. I've been so blessed that he introduced me to this ministry. And, my life verse is Galatians 2:20, and that's, for I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And, that's my testimony, and it's still going on. Who knows what, after this next trip, when I was in Golden Eves in February, I prayed with a woman who has leprosy, modern day leprosy. 3 years ago, her hands were fine. Now her fingers are rotted off. One of their index fingers turned around upside down. If you're here today and you've never been on a mission trip, I encourage you. We're to be on mission. And missions are not just over there. They're right here. You got a huge mission field right here in your corner. Right up the street, down the street, in your office, your neighborhoods. But it's also across the world. I'm going to tell you, when you go over there and you see a father and a daughter who have an ear infection and stuff oozing out of their ear, and they just been going to school and to work for weeks. We can't really get our arms around that, can we? We get an ear infection, we go to the doctor, get some amoxicillin, a week later, hey, we're good. They go to school and go to work because there is no medicine. And it either heals or destroys their hearing or poisons their bloods and kills them. We were doing a medical camp at this orphanage, and once the people around heard that there was medicine and doctors, you'd have thought Jesus was there. I guess he was. But they started storming the gate, and I looked down there and I saw the pastor just telling them, no, I can't let you, only so many. And they were like shooting up under his arm, trying to they were clawed, they were desperate. It broke my heart. And there's no way that you can go to a third world country and see stuff like that and come back and be the same. It changed my life. And so I encourage you, if you're thinking about that, to do it. Go for God. God puts it on your heart to talk to somebody. Do it. It's one thing to, at the moment of salvation, you get all the Holy Spirit you're going to get, right? And he talks to you. And if we don't listen, we've missed the opportunity. But the more we obey and the more we listen, the more we hear him talking. And the greater things he does, And so one of the last things I want to leave you with is, the story in I believe it's in Luke, where Jesus crossed over the Gerasenes and got out of the boat, and there was this guy who was possessed, running naked, chains wouldn't hold him, howling among the tombs, cutting himself, terrorizing the village. And Jesus cast the demons out of him, sent him into the herd of pigs. Pigs went down the lake, drowned. All the town people come out, and they freaked out, and they told Jesus, go away. Well, what really freaked me out about that story, and the first few times I read it, when the man was in his right mind, Jesus got back in the boat, he started to follow him, and Jesus said, no. Go back. And I thought, no. He told everybody, follow me. Follow me. Let the dead bury the dead. You follow me. And he told this guy, no. Go back to your family and tell everyone what the Lord has done for you. And it hit me. There is nothing more powerful and an amazing testament of God than a changed life. Well, the very person who was terrorizing the village is now singing his praises. There's no more effective witness for the kingdom of God than a transformed life. And folks, when you get it, you got to give it away. You got to tell everybody, because people see that. They're real, You can't fake it. When God changes you, you can't fake that. Dude was out of his mind, cutting himself. And then he's dressed in his right mind. And it's a shame when people say, we don't want that to go away. They should have been joining in and singing praises. So, as you guys continue to grow and learn, you got to go. It's across the street or next door or to another country. But I encourage you to go, and I really appreciate you for inviting me to share my testimony. And as I said, this is just God's story, and I get to share it. So thanks for letting me share. Thanks.